Setelah berlangsung lebih dari sepekan, ketegangan antara Rusia dan Ukraina belum juga menunjukkan tanda-tanda akan mereda. Rusia masih melancarkan agresi bertubi-tubi terhadap Ukraina dan Ukraina meminta bantuan kepada seluruh dunia, termasuk Nato selaku organisasi pertahanan kolektif, manajemen krisis dan juga keamanan kolektif negara-negara barat. Lantas bagaimana sebenarnya Nato menyikapi situasi ini dan di mana sebenarnya posisi Nato? Untuk itu kita akan membahasnya bersama Ambassador Baiba Braze as the Assistant Secretary General for Public Diplomacy of NATO. A very good morning to you, Madam Braze.
Selamat siang, Indonesia.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Greetings from Brussels.
We would like to thank you because I know it is quite early morning in Brussels right now. So once again, thank you very much for making the time to be with us on CNN Indonesia today. And Madam, as a Western Mutual Defense Alliance, which sees an attack on one member as an attack on all, NATO's position is quite central to the aggression in Ukraine, even though Ukraine is not a member. We would like to know about what is exactly the position of NATO amid the situation.
Once again, thank you for having me. And obviously, the Russian war in Ukraine is central to what we do here at NATO, in terms of trying to both guarantee the safety security of the 30 NATO allies, so 1 billion people that live in NATO countries, and NATO is a defensive political military alliance, so that is our core task, to make sure that 30 countries and their populations are secure and safe. But also we have a number of partners, and Ukraine is one of those partners. So we, of course, are helping Ukraine in this war that Russia has started totally without a reason against Ukraine. And we are also working with partners across the globe, with all democratic and all the countries around the world, because obviously Russia's invasion of Ukraine affects the whole global peace and security. And that is why last week in the United Nations we saw a very significant movement of 141 countries all around the world, including Indonesia, condemning Russian action, adopting a resolution, strongest ever, in clearly defining this Russian war. And we have seen the United Nations Secretary General issue a number of strong statements, and including against Russia, defining this as a threat to peace and security and a violation of Ukrainian territorial integrity and sovereignty. Yeah. So for us, obviously, the situation with this Russian bombing of Ukrainian cities, killing civilians, and lying about it, we take it very, very seriously. So our action is threefold. One, making sure that everything that we do as NATO to protect our 30 allies, that we do everything necessary for that. Second, that we support Ukraine in its fight against Russia. And third, that we have the international community that is united and that is clearly working towards stopping Russian aggression and returning to peace, withdrawal of Russian troops, and just stopping this killing of innocent civilians in Ukraine.
Yeah, so we can say that NATO have relationships between these two nations, and we would like to know more about how is exactly the relationship between your organization with Russia and Ukraine, and how does this aggression affect your organization's relationship to both nations, ma'am?
Thank you very much. So the NATO's relationship with Ukraine is a relationship of a partnership. We have quite a number of partners around the world. From Colombia to countries in around the Mediterranean and ICIs, the countries of Arab countries and others. So in that respect, the partnerships that we have are very different and various, and it depends what the country wants. Our partnership with Ukraine has been a long-standing one. Ukraine has expressed its wish to join NATO. So that is very clearly, you know, what has been a free will of a country. Ukraine has expressed its wish also to join the European Union. Mm-hmm. So just like for Indonesia, you make your choices, what is best for Indonesia. Ukrainian government and people makes their choices, and that is their sovereign right. It's nobody else's business what they want to do. And in that respect, we of course respect that right. Ukraine has been doing a lot of practical reforms on its way both to the EU and NATO. From our side, as 30 nations, we have supported Ukraine in that way, very practical way. We have trained their military, we have advised them on defense reforms, but also on various security reforms. There were quite a number of things that had to be done in that respect. In the current situation, what we support in Ukraine is, of course, its right to self-defense. In accordance with United Nations Charter Article 51, Ukraine has an inherent right of self-defense. That's why allies are supporting Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's very clear.
Yeah.
As for Russia,
yeah.
Russia, we have actually a long-standing relationship with Russia also. And Russia's leaders has been at NATO summits, They have participated in a number of high-level meetings. There has been a dialogue with Russia. So the current choice that Putin has made with regard to invading a neighboring peaceful country is, of course, contrary to everything that the world stands for. And that is why currently, of course, there is nothing to do with the dialogue. As far as we are concerned, there is the war has to stop for the dialogue to return.
Yeah, talking about choices, madam, it is very interesting because we could see that these two nations has clearly make different choices. We are talking about Ukrainian first. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called for a no-fly zone over his country, and to public eyes, NATO seems neglected this request. You know, I've got one big question on this matter. Why?
Because we support Ukraine in different ways. If NATO was to impose a no-fly zone, it would practically mean NATO entering war with Russia. So that choice has not been made. We support Ukraine in different ways, as important to make sure that the right to self-defense is very practically implemented in Ukraine.
Okay.
Again, let's be very clear. It's the whole world's interest to support Ukraine, to support its democratic choice. It's a democratic country, just like Indonesia or Malaysia or other countries in your region. And it's important that countries make their choices. They can decide how they want to proceed and what organizations they want to join or not. And in this respect, that's the right of Ukraine to decide its model of living. And there is nobody else's business to invade it or under lies and propaganda to basically accuse it of all types of things. And that is what Russia is doing.
Okay.
Russia has to stop its war.
Okay. Does this choices of NATO are related to the defensive course of action that is previously on the beginning of our interview you've mentioned?
Yes, indeed. The allies, again, you know, there's a variety of supports that the whole world is giving to Ukraine. So it's not just NATO. We have seen Australia providing very practical financial, humanitarian, and military aid. We have seen countries around the world, also in Asia, imposing sanctions on Ukraine, heavy sanctions to stop its economy supporting the war. We have seen political support, again, at the United Nations. We have seen European Union countries and the EU as an organization, of course, providing billions in assistance, but also military aid to Ukraine. We have seen Sweden and Finland providing very practical aid in military and financial and humanitarian aid. We all are interested to stop this war, to make sure that Russia has such costs imposed that is unable to support this war. And afterwards, after the war is ended, and rebuild Ukraine, rebuild the international system, and to make sure this current aggression doesn't affect the world as we are organized overall, where the countries are indeed free to make their choices, how they want to live.
Okay. And how do you think this direction that NATO is heading by, maintaining the defensive course of action would be effective in order to prevent this scale of war that has been going on increasing to not only in Ukraine, to probably all over the world?
Yes, and that is a core task of NATO, protecting 30 allies, 30 countries, members of NATO. So what has been done, again, it's a political military alliance, it's a defensive alliance, so the preventive action has been taken. There are thousands of more troops that are now placed at higher readiness at the borders of NATO with Russia and outside borders of Russia to make sure that there is no spillover from Russia's action into NATO. There is a higher state of readiness for all our troops and also, obviously, for all civilian structures that support this endeavor. And the third big pillar is the different control and command and control arrangements, meaning that Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, General Todd Walters, has got much more streamlined authority in terms of making sure that the troops that he has at his command and those troops and equipment are ready in all domains, in the sea, on the land, in the sky, in cyber, that he's able to command those troops whenever and however it's necessary to maintain peace. So this is, in essence, is what NATO is doing. It's, of course, underpinned by very specific plans, defense planning, crisis planning, and so we are ready against all threats. But again, that is a defensive posture. NATO is a defensive political military alliance, and its task is to save peace.
Okay. So, Madam, this is the last question for today. Right now, we know that Russia is getting sanctions from all over the world. I wonder if is there any way out? I mean, if President Putin sees these sanctions as a declaration of war, what would NATO do to avoid this? And what is the possible scenario? And to conclude this interview, do you have something to say to anyone that watches the interview?
I will start from the last question. I think every one of us wants peace and security. Peace and security allows us to send our children to school, to educate ourselves, to build businesses, to build our futures. That is what Ukrainian people want. There is nothing more than that. And as all countries in the world, it's our obligation to support Ukraine at this hour of destiny, in this fight against the invasion, against the foreign aggressor that Russia currently is. And as far as NATO is concerned, we are 30 democratic countries, and our collective task is indeed to guarantee peace and security for our 1 billion citizens, but also we are, as democratic countries, supporting Ukraine. And as far as Russia is concerned, we are doing everything necessary to stop Russia's war in Ukraine. And that also involves imposing sanctions on Russian action, on Russian political system, economic system, so that they cannot finance this war, so that its actions are stopped. And that is a prime reason where international community has worked together. It's not about Russian people, it's not about Russian literature or sports, it's actually about really making sure that Russia stops the war.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam Baiba Braze, as the Assistant Secretary General for Public Diplomacy of NATO, for joining us today. We do really hope that peace would be resolved, and let's aim for peace together. Thank you very much, Madam Braze.
Thank you very much for having me, and greetings to beautiful Jakarta and wonderful Indonesian people. I miss you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam. Have a great day ahead.
All the best.